Hi, everybody. See the participants are kind of trickling in here. We opened the webinar a few minutes early to let everybody in. We'll get started in just a little bit. All right, we've got about another minute. I'm gonna just see if more people come in and then we'll get started. All right, it's 12 o'clock. Thank you to all of our attendees for being here today for FACP's webinar on Islam 101. We are so lucky and honored to have Maha Elkolalli here with us today. Thank you so much for being here. And tell you a little bit about her. Maha is a solo practitioner in the areas of family law and civil litigation and has been practicing law for 11 years. In addition, she is a public speaker presenting at various colleges and universities. She is an adjunct professor at the Shepherd Broad College of Law at Nova Southeastern University. Prior to attending law school, Maha was a child protective supervisor with ChildNet, was a family services counselor for the Department of Children and Families, and served as a government analyst for the Department of Juvenile Justice. She is a graduate of the State University of New York in Albany, graduating summa cum laude with a dual BA degree in psychology and in sociology, and graduated magna cum laude, receiving a JD from Nova. She has been recognized with various awards and honors, including the Women of Impact Award, resulting in Miami-Dade County proclaiming March 13, 2018 as Maha Elkolalli Day. Pretty cool. The Greatness of Service Award, the CAIR Florida Community Service Award, the Helping Hand Award, and the State of Florida Child Advocate of the Year Award. So again, thank you so much for being with us today, and the mic is all yours.
Thank you, Kristen, for having me. It's an absolute honor to be here. I am going to share screen. Welcome to everybody. I like that it's an intimate small group. Listen, the chat is open, so whatever questions you all have as I go along, go ahead and type it in there so you don't forget, and I will address them either intermittently as we go along or at the very end. So again, thank you, Kristen, for having me. This topic is near and dear to my heart, and I love opening dialogue with people of different faiths because I think it breaks down barriers. So let me, can you all see this? You're good, okay. Let me just begin it, open my chat box, and give me a second to go back to page 1. Okay, so it's Cultural Awareness, Islam 101 for collaborative family law training. Again, I'm a member of the Florida Muslim Bar Association, and I am the Community Outreach Director of South Florida Muslim Federation. So I thank them for helping me create this. So how does this knowledge benefit your practice? And I don't usually teach this way. I like to impromptu everything and speak from the heart, but I think there's critical information in this PowerPoint that could benefit everybody. So essentially in the practice of law or in dealing with families that are going through divorce or guardianship or any of these family law issues that they may face, you know, you want to have this cultural awareness and this cultural sensitivity. It's for you and for your own self-growth, but also it expands your potential clientele. In our community, once somebody is kind of stamped as culturally sensitive, people will flock to that person because unfortunately, there's a little bit of a shortage of that cultural sensitivity and that respect in society now. So you having this will give you an edge. You'll have a more detailed understanding of what needs to be addressed in family law cases as it pertains to Muslim families. Again, cultural sensitivities, and some of these issues impact various religious groups. So what I found in my litigation is that when I'm litigating, for example, the Muslim marriage contract, there's also a similar Jewish marriage contract that can be enforced by similar case law. So in my orders, I try to do a blanket order where enforceability of a Muslim marriage contract could apply to other religions that may have similar contracts. So just to give you an overview, there's this idea that Muslims are all Arabs. You get this picture in your mind. We all create images from media, but this is I found this to be really interesting, that there's 3.45 million people, and the Muslim Americans are the most racially diverse religious group in the United States. So we're estimated at 3.45 million. 41% of those are considered white, but that includes Arab, Middle Eastern, Iranian, but 20% are African American, which sometimes is overlooked. We have an 8% Hispanic population in the Muslim community, and this number is growing at a very fast speed. So it's an extremely diverse population. They have various views. So you'll find very conservative Muslims and you'll find moderate Muslims. And I can guarantee you often come across Muslims and you don't even realize that they're Muslim. So for example, we have a state representative now whose name is Christopher Benjamin. He doesn't have a Muslim name, and a lot of people just wouldn't know that he's Muslim. So these are things that, we don't often know somebody's religious orientation or what holidays they may celebrate that need to be addressed in a parenting plan or holiday schedule. And those are questions we should ask of everyone. Are there any special holidays that you celebrate that I may not know of? So here are some key terms that are often misinterpreted. Islam is basically, the meaning of the word is peace. And again, I'm going to go through some basic tenets of Islam. I am not a scholar of religion, but this is just a blanket understanding of the religion. And then I'm going to apply it at the end to, how it relates to family law. So Islam essentially means peace, but it's peace through submission to God. A Muslim is a practitioner of Islam. Allah is basically the Arabic word for God, as used in all the Abrahamic faiths. Imam is a religious leader. Halal is it's a dietary observance by Muslims, but it includes the proper slaughter of animals. Sharia law is often a term that's scary to everybody. Hold on, I went back. But it's basically divine law for all places and time. So we attempt to elaborate and understand Sharia law, which leads to different schools of thought. So you have Muslims who are considered Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, and they share the certain core beliefs, but they have different interpretations of different Islamic law. So this will come into play when you're interpreting the Muslim marriage contract, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Mu'akhar and mahr is also, these are terms that you should be familiar with, where it's, mu'akhar and mahr is basically a dowry, and it's delayed. Mu'akhar is the delayed dowry. Mu'addam is a dowry paid at the time of the marriage or prior to the marriage. A wali is considered a protector of the bride, and the family member who will consent when she gives her authorization. Jummah just means Friday, and it's significant because that's our day of prayer. And Eid means holiday. So these are terms that you're going to come across a lot. Of course, there are a lot of other terms, but these are the main ones that we'll address. So again, Islam is an Abrahamic religion, and it teaches that there's one God, the same God as the Christians and the Jews. We believe in a lot of the similar prophets: Adam, Noah, Jacob, Joseph, David, Abraham, Moses, Jesus. And it's interesting because a lot of people don't realize this. There's a guy at the courthouse. He always stops me and, Jesus loves you. And I always tell him, I love Jesus too, because he just doesn't realize Jesus plays a huge part in our text. And Mary, may God be pleased with her, actually has a whole chapter in the Quran designated just for her. And Moses is the prophet that's named the most in our scripture. So it's interesting to see how many more similarities people have across the board, and the differences are minor. Muslims believe in the original unaltered scriptures of the Torah, the Bible, the Psalms of David, and the Quran is a continuation of the divine message. Core beliefs. So there are 5 pillars, if you will. The declaration of the faith, 5 daily prayers, and these are important to know in your practice. So for example, I was in a mediation. I was the only Muslim. I was the attorney for one of the parties. My client was of Jewish faith. The mediator was Jewish. The opposing counsel was Jewish. And the opposing side was Christian. And, you know, it was a 9-hour mediation. And the mediator and my client said, "Isn't it time for you to pray? Should we stop?" And I just found that to be so sensitive. So this not only applies to your clients that they have to stop and pray at a certain point, but it also is, you know, very culturally sensitive to your opposing counsel, or if you're a mediator, that's something important to know. And there are 2 of these 5 prayers that can fall within the workday. And then there's the obligation to give charity, fasting during the month of Ramadan. So you really want to know this, because if your client is fasting, they're probably non-functional after 2 o'clock in Ramadan. So you want to be very careful, like you're not scheduling either, you know, a long mediation or a long meeting at the end of the day, because you're not going to really get a functional person there. And also to just be sensitive to opposing counsel, and in scheduling things, Ramadan is definitely a month of focus on worship. So you should be aware of when that month falls on the calendar each year. Pilgrimage to Mecca. Again, this probably won't apply much, except that there's a holiday that falls within that time frame. And sometimes you'll see attorneys putting in a notice of unavailability because they have to travel to Mecca. Major holidays. So again, this is important. You must know this when you have a client who is, you know, you're doing a parenting plan for them, because our parenting plans don't include these holidays. So again, every Muslim worships a little bit differently. You'll find some similarities, like usually you'll find 9 out of 10, they'll be celebrating Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. And these are 3 and 4 day holidays. So these are the main holidays. You want to be sure that you include this in your parenting plan, and that it's very detailed, and that you understand that the prayer for these holidays begins at the beginning of the day, so that you'll want to rotate these, very similar to how you rotate Easter, you know, Easter and Christmas, or those types of holidays. Ramadan also, it might impact the timeshare schedule because of the time that they start the fast and break the fast and go to prayer. So you just want to see. And often my clients will say, no, we're just going to keep the same schedule, but you want to at least ask the question. Muharram is more so for the Shia Muslims. It's the first month of the Islamic calendar. Ashura is the 10th day of Muharram. And the Muslims, a lot of Muslims fast like the 9th and 10th to commemorate when Moses parted the sea to free the Jews from Egypt. For the Shias, it's to commemorate the martyrdom of the grandson of the prophet, peace be upon him. So this is also a big deal. And some people celebrate it more so than others. So it really varies family to family, but it's something you want to be aware of. The dates change from one year to the next, which make it a bit difficult for scheduling, right? So it's not like Christmas that falls December 25th every year. It goes back approximately, I want to say, is it 15 years? 15 days every year. So like you'll see Ramadan this year started April 12th. I guess it's 10 days. And next year it's scheduled for April 2nd. It's based on the lunar calendar, and it's often a lunar sighting. So these days can vary, going up and down 2-3 days. It really just depends. And trying to explain that sometimes in court is a little bit of a challenge, but it's something that you should know about. And obviously, if you have any questions, you could reach out to me, and I can answer whatever questions you have. But these are the dates for the next 2 years. Okay, so again, the Friday prayer, we mentioned it earlier. So very much like Christians go to church on Sunday or the Sabbath on Saturday for the Jews, Friday is known as the Jummah prayer, and that's our holy day. So for me, and most judges that I go in front of are aware, I'm not likely to schedule anything on Friday in the afternoon because I want to make it to prayer. It's something that I think is important for my spirituality. So it's something you want to be sensitive to for scheduling. So I may do motion calendar on, well, it's not even usually motion calendar on Friday, but I could do like an early hearing, but usually Friday I leave it open. And again, in New York, this has been litigated and defendants don't have to appear in court on Fridays if they request. Hijab. So hijab is basically modesty, and it's a key component of the Muslim faith. And it's, you know, people define this very differently. Women cover their hair, and men actually have a level of modesty as well. So I won't go into this in too much detail, but you'll see that there are different, here, let me give you a visual. There's different ways of wearing it, different forms of modesty. You know, like I wear mine in a turban a lot, but you'll see this in various forms. So essentially you want to be sensitive to the idea that sometimes women will not shake hands with the opposite sex, and that's not being disrespectful. It's just something that they don't do. They like there's a barrier between male and female contact. So what they'll do is one of these, you know, on their chest, like they'll greet you like this. So if you know this in advance, like I've had people who are aware and they'll say, do you shake hands? You know, they'll ask. And I think that's really sensitive because some people will shake your hand and other people, just as a form of modesty and, you know, being compliant with the religion, they will not. So it's good to know. Okay, here, this one. Diane, I think, wanted me to scroll back. So these numbers, I don't know how accurate these numbers are, but I guess it also depends on where you are in the world. So, you know, different countries have different levels of modesty, even in the United States. If you go to like a city like New York City, you're going to see more hijabs. Even here in South Florida, when I first was here as a child, I didn't see it much, and now I see a lot more of it. So it's just modesty. And, you know, it's often misinterpreted, you know. When I open my mouth sometimes in court and I speak English, people are shocked, like, wait, you don't have an accent, you know? Or the idea that we're educated. There are several times at the courthouse, even if I'm suited and have a briefcase, where security will say, this is an attorney only line, because there's this presumption that Muslim women are not educated. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of Muslim women are educated. You know, we value our education, we value our careers. So, you know, this presumption is just something created. It's not a truth by any stretch of the word. Okay, family law context is why we're here, right? So these are the things that may impact your practice. The marriage contract requirements, the enforcement of the Muslim marriage contract, annulments, which is always interesting, the divorce process, guardianships and adoptions, dependency and domestic violence. So we'll go through each of these. Am I going too fast, or are you guys still okay? You're following? Everybody's good?
I think everybody's good.
Okay. So marriage is defined in the Quran as a compassionate and peaceful relationship that's grounded in love. And it's interesting because this isn't always the perception. The perception by the public is often that these are arranged marriages. Are there arranged marriages? Yes, there could be, but that is not an Islamic requirement. It's not even, consent is a very big deal in Islam. So there is a requirement for Muslim couples to consult with one another as a means of engaging in joint decision-making within their relationship. So it's not a dictatorship. You know, Muslim women have many, many, many rights in Islam. That's a whole class in and of itself. But that perception is false. So the Muslim marriage contract, these are enforceable in court. I have enforced them in Miami-Dade County, Broward County, and Palm Beach County. They're not often litigated because usually they come to an agreement through mediation when these contracts exist. But you can try these. So the way that they are tried is that the Muslim marriage contract is enforceable under contract law, and you have to plead it under contract law. It is aside from the distribution of marital assets and liabilities. It is in addition to whatever happens within the realm of the divorce process. This is litigated as a contract. So the Muslim marriage contract is considered to be a sacred covenant involving two consenting parties making an agreement in the presence of two witnesses. The requirements are consent, which is offer and acceptance. And here we highlight no forced marriages, two witnesses usually, the wali, which we defined earlier, who's the guardian, and that's usually the bride's father or her brother or her uncle, somebody who's responsible for her safety and well-being. Dowry can be also called the mahar and the sadaq, and the bride's acceptance. So again, the bride's acceptance is mandatory, and usually the bride will consent to the wali, and the wali will be the person who states her acceptance. Can the wali be a woman? Not to my knowledge, it's usually a man. Again, I'm not an expert in theology, so there may be a little, I'd have to get back to you on that, but my understanding is that it's usually the father, the brother, the uncle, or somebody that in the community that is designated as this person's wali, that she trusts to, to preserve her safety. And just to back up on that, the wali in Islam, women are, again, they're given so many rights. So for example, our earnings, and this is something maybe everybody should know. In Islam, the earnings of a woman are hers. The husband has no right to her earnings, has no right to her inheritance, and she should keep those separate. And the husband is, or the wali, whoever he may be, is actually obligated. The husband's income is his income, and the wife has rights to it. She has rights to be supported and for, all of her needs to be taken care of by the husband. So essentially that's why the wali is a man. Okay, the mahar, sadaq, and the dowry is an agreed upon marital gift of choice decided by the wife and given by the husband. So it could be anything from a ring of iron to a mountain of gold. And you will see these vary. So I sometimes will ask at my consult, like, what is the mu'akhar? And sometimes it's like $100, and that's not worth litigating. And sometimes it's $15,000, and that is worth litigating. So you really want to see what's the amount. The marriage contract is not valid without it, and it's the exclusive property of the wife. Again, this goes again to the rights of a woman in Islam. So whatever she is given as her mahar or her mu'akhar, her husband has no rights to it. It's payable at the onset of the marriage, so it becomes a debt at the onset of the marriage. However, it's often split between like mu'addam and mu'akhar, which is, partially given in the beginning, or all of it is deferred or partially deferred. So God forbid he dies, or there's a divorce, then she's entitled to that money. And the balance is payable upon demand, divorce, or death. So it's treated as a debt, right? So what I do with these, so the lead case on this is the Akila case. And there is a new case law that's coming in, and it's really interesting to see this unfold and for the courts to define what part of this is enforceable, when is it not enforceable. So what we do is we call a witness, an expert witness who can, and so these are, you apply Islamic law to the interpretation of the contract. And in order for the court to understand, okay, well, when does this contract apply? What are the terms? And to understand the language within, we call a religious leader. In our situation, it would be the imam. If it's a Jewish contract, then you would want a rabbi or somebody who has an understanding of Jewish law. And they explain when these contracts are enforceable. So you're gonna, again, apply the facts of this whatever particular case you have. Sometimes they're gonna be enforceable as interpreted under Islamic law, and other times they're not enforceable. So it's case by case depending on the application of the Islamic law to it. And again, it's in addition to the distribution. Okay, so fault matters in these interpretations, and this is something that would come out from the expert witness. So you want to speak to your expert witness before you do this, so you know, okay, do I have a contract that's enforceable or not? Arguably, when the wife initiates the divorce, she's not entitled to the delayed dowry. I have overcome that when there's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, or failure to provide support, or the abandonment of the wife. So there are times where even if she initiates, it's enforceable, and I have enforced the dowry and the Muslim marriage contract even when the wife has initiated divorce. So again, this is case by case, but in Islam, fault matters when you're applying the Muslim marriage contract under contract law. So again, you're kind of having a two-part trial, if you will, if you end up litigating these cases. Annulments. This is a really interesting one because in Islam, there's no dating. So, and of course, there's conservative Muslims, there's not conservative Muslims, and it varies across the spectrum. But generally speaking, what they'll do is they'll get engaged, or the Muslim marriage contract will be signed, and they're married essentially in front of God, so they can go out and do, you know, hang out together, and it's kind of like dating, but they're married. And in this situation, the marriage has not been consummated. And it's really interesting because when I do these, you have to take testimony. Was the marriage consummated? Why was it not consummated? But this is fairly common, you know, and they come in waves for me. So sometimes I'll get 5 in a row, and other times it'll just be quiet for a while. But this is common, that they would have a Muslim marriage contract, the marriage is never consummated, and for purposes of the girl saying she's never been married, the annulment might be the best route. So if you get a girl coming in, or a woman coming in who's saying, you know, we were married, you want to ask the question, was it consummated? How long were you married? Because if it was just the Muslim marriage contract and they haven't had the wedding yet, then there's a possibility that an annulment would be more appropriate. Okay, guardianships and adoptions. So I found this to be very challenging when I was doing child protection law, protective services, because in Islam, there is no adoption, you know, per se, where the child takes on your name and becomes your child. Genealogy is extremely important, but we've kind of conquered this a bit in the community through education. So long as the child continues to know his or her roots and the biological family, we don't change the names of children who are adopted. So the biological family ties are not severed. Of course, if there is a situation of abuse, then we follow the laws in accordance to that, if there's to be no contact with the abuser or something like that. But generally, if there's no abuse and no history that would hinder, the biological family ties are not severed. And we call the child by his or her birth name. And again, when there's abuse, abandonment, or neglect, there's a clear obligation to protect the child from the perpetrator. So when you have a child who is being adopted by a Muslim family, you kind of want to ask these questions. Dependency. So I worked for ChildNet and Department of Children and Families in the past. So I have a relationship with them. So if they get a child, they've had a child at a safe place that was wearing a niqab, like her face was covered. And they really didn't know what to do with her. So they just had never come across that before. And these are questions we want you to reach out to the Federation or the Florida Muslim Bar Association and ask us, like, what are this child's needs? And I remember like sibling groups of 10, and they had Muslim names, and they'd been in foster care so long, they never even knew what their names meant. So these are things that are important to children and to their identity and to understanding who they are. So when Muslim children are in foster care, you want to make sure that they have the ability and that their caretaker knows and understands these children have the right to pray 5 times a day, that there's an understanding of the month of Ramadan, that they can participate in mosque activities, they have access to attire such as hijab, and that their dietary restrictions are respected. domestic violence. So Islam prohibits all forms of oppression, injustice, and abuse. It is very clear in the Quran that um, women and the relationship between men and women should be one of kindness, mutual respect, and consideration. Forced marriages are prohibited. Things to know, other things to know. So these are issues that I've come across in my practice. Um, Terrorism or extremism, right? So what you'll find is sometimes even when both parties are Muslim, one of them will play the extremism card to try to get access to the kids and to deprive the other parent. Be very careful with this. You know, somebody who is just practicing is not an extremist, right? Um, and it's so easy to pull the terrorism card because it's so scary, right? But you want to do your due diligence and make sure that these are not these don't enter pleadings without um, justification, because that's a very serious allegation. Parents who convert to Islam. So I've had a case where the mother converted after the divorce, and the children were practicing and they enjoyed going to the mosque. And I remember it was during Christmas break, and the father did an emergency motion for pickup order because the children are forced into this extremist behavior. And, you know, parents are allowed to teach their children their religious beliefs, whether it's the same as the other parent or different. And that is not something that the court should intervene in. It's not grounds for removal of children. And again, I've done extensive research on that situation, unfortunately, because I've had to litigate it. And we've had, you know, judges on the bench who actually participate and do these things, and we've had to go up to the appellate court. So it's actually very scary that parents can lose their children because of their religious practices. Muslim school versus public school. This is something you want to ask during the parenting plan, developing of the parenting plan. Sometimes parents want to enter the children into Muslim schools. There are scholarships available. So if funding is an issue, that's something that you may want to tell your family that you're serving. But you know, is this part of the parenting plan? Are the children attending Muslim schools? To what age group? And now in South Florida, there are several Muslim schools. Traveling abroad. So you'll find a huge immigrant population in the Muslim community. Traveling abroad, I know in my childhood, was an annual event. It's a big deal for my children to know their roots. So we go and come annually. And a lot of these countries are non-Hague countries. These are things you want to address. But in traveling abroad, unfortunately, there's been this situations where they're non-Hague countries, and the father has different rights in those countries. So you want to be careful that the children don't travel abroad and then end up not returning to the United States. So these are all issues you want to take into consideration. With that comes dual citizenship. So with dual citizenship, you know, you can sometimes go get another passport for the child from another country. And even if the passport is held, the American passport is held here in trust by someone, there could be another passport given from another country. So you want to address these concerns. You want to ask your clients, is there any fear of this? Husband as the provider, we kind of hit up on that already, that it's his obligation, according to the faith, to be the provider for the wife and children. Okay, body language. So it's interesting because I've had this come up. Hold on a second. I've had this come up during evaluation. So for example, psychosexual evaluations. I'll give you that example. In Islam, some people are very shy speaking of their sexuality or their sexual history. And I've had cases where it was so embarrassing for the client to talk about this that the evaluator read that as being, you know, him holding back on information, and that he was so conservative sexually that it wasn't likely that he was telling the truth. So you want to make sure that the evaluator is culturally sensitive. With law enforcement, sometimes, especially like with the immigrant population, you'll see that they don't make eye contact with law enforcement. And that could be read as, you know, they're lying or not being truthful, when in reality, they just don't make eye contact because culturally that's disrespectful to law enforcement. So just the understanding that during these evaluations and in these reports, that body language can really be misread. Language barriers and interpreters. This is sometimes challenging because nobody wants to pay an Arabic interpreter. They are often expensive, and they'll say, no, I know English. But the fact of the matter is that sometimes they just think in a different language. So if I have an Arabic speaking client, I hear them in English and I hear them in Arabic, and they articulate 10 times better in Arabic. I'm gonna say, you need an interpreter. Even if you understand in English, you're articulating much better in Arabic, and the interpreter will be able to give that. So even if they say, I know English, you kind of want to gauge that. Inheritance laws are very different in Islam. So if this comes up, I know this is more probate, but it'll often come up, and you want to make sure if it does come up that you seek guidance in that area. There are several Muslim probate attorneys, I know in Broward County and Dade County, but the laws are different. Life insurance. So we often back up child support with life insurance. And you just need to know basically that some Muslims believe that life insurance is not permissible. So you may come across that challenge as it pertains to life insurance issues when you're creating that parenting plan. And I think that goes, those are the slides. These are the officers and board members of the FMBA. Feel free to reach out to any of us. And South Florida Muslim Federation is also very active. So you can reach out to the South Florida Muslim Federation. And here is my contact information and a few resources. Okay, so let me go through and see what questions we had. Oh, Bob is here. I'm excited to have you in this webinar. Okay, Shabir, jihad is another word which is misrepresented too. I don't see jihad come up so much in the family law context, but it's an interesting word that everyone is afraid of. Everyone's afraid to ask. It basically means struggle. And often it's an internal struggle to do what's right and to, you know, like the struggle between doing right and wrong. Obviously, there is an external component to it. I don't really see this come up much. I've seen it one time on a very extreme case that the FBI was involved in, where the parent took the child overseas and there was a jihad question that came in. But those are usually rare and very high profile cases. Okay, Eid. I thought Eid was a particular holiday. So Eid just means celebration in and of itself, the word. But it is a particular holiday. There are two Eids. One is Eid al-Fitr, which is immediately after Ramadan. And the other one is Eid al-Adha. So one of them is 3 days, one of them is 4 days. But the word Eid in and of itself just means celebration. Does giving charity extend to giving charity to non-Muslims? Yes, I mean, I give charity to everyone whenever in need. But usually they'll pay it like it goes through the mosque and then there's a distribution. But we have social services in our community, and those social services serve the community at large, whether it's medical services, you know, food drives, whatever it is, we serve the community at large, of course. The mahar is the exclusive property of the wife. However, you then mentioned that depending on the amount or worth of the mahar, it would be worth litigating. Can you explain more about how it would be litigated if it is the exclusive property of the wife? Oh, thank you, Candace. Okay, so it is, okay, so it's the exclusive property of the wife upon payment. So the mahar could be paid mu'addam, which is in advance, or mu'akhar, which is at the time of divorce or death, or at the time that she requests it. or it could be split where some of it is given up front, some of it is given on the back end. So if she got it on the front end of the marriage, that money is hers. It's important to know that. But in litigating it, you're litigating it under contract law to retrieve it because the husband is holding it. If it's a mu'akhar, the husband is holding it and it was due to her and she had rights to it under contract law at the time of the marriage. So you have to litigate it under contract law, and whatever she receives, that is hers, non-distributable. I hope that answers. Let me know if that answered your question. Is there a stigma for a Muslim woman who has been divorced? Sometimes, I mean, now it's kind of interesting, the stigma. And again, I'm not an expert in theology, but the Prophet's wife, may blessings be upon her, she was married twice before she married him. And she had children from those marriages. And, you know, there was no stigma for her. And he loved her dearly, you know. So our example from a theological perspective is that there is no stigma, and that, you know, you marry women who are divorced and women who have children. Unfortunately, sometimes there's a cultural stigma. And I guess as divorce becomes more common, unfortunately, right, that stigma has dissipated some. But if it's a girl who has not consummated the marriage, I still go the route of the annulment, because you never know. Sometimes in the community, there could be stigma culturally. Is declaring I divorced thee 3 times the legal way to end the Muslim marriage? Okay, so according to Islamic law, divorcing her 3 times makes that divorce final. But it's twofold. And I'm glad you brought up this question because I don't have it in the slides. But you'll often see Muslim leaders won't conduct a Muslim divorce until they see the divorce decree from the court. Okay, and then they take that Muslim decree from the divorce decree from the court, take it to the mosque, and then they get the Muslim divorce. Sometimes a man will say to the woman, I'm not giving you the divorce. In Islam, a woman is entitled to request the divorce. And again, this is like different schools of thought, and that's a conversation that I can go into forever. But what I tell women is, once you get this legal divorce, you take it and you can get your Muslim divorce. But is it sometimes a bullying tactic? Like, I won't divorce you, and then women freak out? Yes. And you just have to reassure them and maybe speak to a religious leader who will enforce the legal divorce. Is this webinar available to share? Kristen can tell you. I'm not sure. I
just answered that one. It's going to be posted. It's recorded and it's going to be posted on the FACP website.
Okay, perfect. Okay, David, since the woman's income is hers, she should not likely ever pay any spousal support. You know, it's interesting you say this, because I was talking to another Muslim family law attorney, and his position was, I'll only do these when they're in compliance with the Islamic law. I said, well, that's good, because then, you know, that Muslim doctor, she owes him nothing. Yeah, so technically, no, she does not pay spousal support. It is a man's responsibility under Islamic law to support the children. So, and again, if I answered these and I didn't explain it, tell me again. Listen, it's not clear. I want to make sure you walk away from this clear. Okay, good, Candace. I'm glad that clarified. Okay, so Robert, your question about the Islamic law has legal standing in U.S. courts. It's contract law, so it's American or Florida contract law, right? But in interpreting the contract, so say you have a contract that's from another country, you want to understand the terms of the contract, you have to understand it under that country's laws or understanding of this contract being formed, formation of the contract. So in understanding the terms of the contract, you have to understand it through Islamic law, and to understand it in what context it's enforceable and when it's not. So then you apply that to Florida contract law, and you have to make sure that it then applies and can be enforced under the requirements of American contract law. I guess it's twofold. So the Islamic law is used in the interpretation of the contract and its terms. Does that clarify? Okay, those are all the questions. Does anybody else have any questions? I can't believe I did this in 43 minutes. I think I panicked and I went so fast because I was scared to run out of time. A marital settlement agreement is technically a contract anyway. Okay, but a marital settlement agreement is a contract within the divorce proceeding. This is a contract, and it's not the Muslim marriage contract or the Jewish marriage contract is not a settlement within the marriage. This is a separate contract. It is not a divorce contract. If one party wants the Islamic contract adjudicated in the US court, and the US laws should be the only laws that have standing. Right, and it applies only if the US laws are met, if the contract meets the requirements under the United States law. But in order to interpret it, you're not going to understand what a mahr is without an expert telling you what that is, or what a mu'akhar is, or when she's due that. You're not going to understand those details unless an expert explains that. And again, if you want to go into more detail, you can contact me at any time. Oh, thank you, Candace. I appreciate you. Yes, exactly. Both local and religious law should apply depending on the issue that is being addressed. Yes. And again, it's a very technical litigating point. So it takes time to get used to, and every time I litigate, it's a little bit different, and the facts are a little bit different. And sometimes I'll tell my client, like, this one is not going to fly. And other times, no, it will, especially if there was abuse. And what you'll find is that in abusive relationships, sometimes the man will not file for the divorce because he knows I'm going to owe her $20,000, and I'm going to wait for her to file so that I don't have to pay that she would have waived. But in certain situations, she did not waive, and she has a right to that money. So every case is different. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Thank you so much, Maha.
Oh, there's more. Okay. If the husband inherits something after the marriage, it's his separate property. Yeah, I mean, generally under family law, the laws of this state, inheritance is not subject to distribution so long as it is kept separate. Now, if he mixes that with marital assets, that may be subject to distribution. And the reason I mention that women are entitled to their inheritance is because, you know, there's the belief that women have no rights, but women are extremely protected through the Islamic laws. But obviously, if her inheritance is mixed, then it may be subject to distribution as well, according to Florida law. I'm going to give it a few more minutes before we close out. Any other questions? Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Evan. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, wait.
There you go.
What about polygamy? I love that you're asking these because these are the questions that people are afraid to ask. That is legal under Sharia, but illegal under US law. Will Islamic marriage contract be honored in a US mosque? Okay, so I can't speak for every mosque. I don't know what they do, but I know in Florida, because on the board of the South Florida Muslim Federation, that they will not conduct a marriage without the marriage license issued by the state. So you have to get your marriage license issued by the state, then you bring it to the mosque for them to conduct that ceremony. So having said that, you can't get a marriage contract if you're already married. So that shouldn't be an issue. I've never filed to enforce the Islamic marriage contract under contract law without a divorce. With a polygamy situation, I haven't had that issue. But my understanding, so basically we have to follow the laws of the land. So if polygamy is permissible under certain situations in Islam, and polygamy is a whole different ball game, and I'm not teaching it here because obviously there's no common law marriage in Florida, and you can only have one spouse. So it doesn't apply or come into play in my practice. But we do have to comply with the laws of the land. Oh, well, I don't know about that federal trial. You'd have to educate me on that. Are there any other questions? And again, the focus here is family law and divorce in Florida, or other family issues that may come up. I'm giving you a few more minutes.
Someone's going to ask a question.
I know, as we try to close out. Okay. Oh, okay. But that's federal, so I'm not sure about that. Does the father automatically get custody of the male kids? No. Again, when it comes to custody or time sharing, as we call it in Florida, that we apply Florida family law. So there are different beliefs, and I'm kind of rusty on them because I don't apply them. We do a best interest analysis, even with Muslim families here. That doesn't change. We don't change Florida laws. It only applies really, I've only had Islamic law come up in interpreting the Muslim marriage contract. But in doing the divorce, they may want to say, okay, I think the father has rights to have the kids after age 7. And some people may apply that. But I use a best interest analysis for each child. And it's not, I don't believe it's different for male or female kids, but again, I'm not an expert in theology, and it doesn't come into play in practice because it's best interest. Can the marriage contract assign custody in the event of divorce? I haven't had one of those. So I don't know at that point if it would be considered a prenup, depending on how it was signed. But again, I would say that's a best interest analysis. I would not be inclined to say that a contract that gives custody to a particular parent that is not in the best interest of the child or that is abusive would hold up in court. That's case by case. Any other questions?
Okay, looks like that might be it.
Yes. I love it. I love the dialogue. I love that you all weren't afraid to ask. That's great. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. So I look forward to more panels like this one. And again, I'm at your service if you want to contact me and you have any other questions or you want to discuss something particular about your case, feel free to contact me. I am here.
Thank you so much. This was so informative and interesting, and you're just a wonderful speaker. So I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it.
I appreciate you. It's wonderful to be here. It's an honor.
Well, thank you, attendees, for being here, and everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.